now that we have finished setting up our event sub stuff on the back end and have gotten a event working on the front end, now it's time to actually create our alerts. So our follow alerts, our sub alerts, our cheer alerts, raid alerts, so on and so forth. However, before we do that, we need to do a little bit of cleanup on the bot, specifically with the request API. If you'll remember from a few streams back, I mentioned that the request API was not only deprecated, it no longer exists. You may be able to still download it on the Node Package Manager. I'm not sure. But at the same time, like, it's no longer being supported. It hasn't gotten updates in like 2 years, and it just needs to be replaced for any projects that are currently using it. So what I did before the stream today is I went through and I replaced all of the current calls to external web resources using requests with Axios. So if you want to use Axios, the first thing you're going to want to do is install it using the Node Package Manager. And the way you're going to want to do that is go npm install and then Axios, spelled like this, Axios, and then -- save. Now, I'm not going to press enter because I already did this, but this is the command that you're going to need to use in order to do this. So once you get Axios installed, you're going to need to first get it imported into your project. And so I just imported it up here. So creating a constant called Axios and then equaling a required statement with the argument of Axios. And so I've already replaced all of the Axios calls in this project except for one. And I wanted to use this particular call to show you how you're going to need to go about replacing the request calls with Axios calls. So the way that Axios works is you can either use it in a async await scenario, and you've seen async await stuff going on whenever we set up our webhook callback. So this is a async function right here, and asynchronous functions are ones that will allow you to do more than one thing at the same time. So Axios is a API that does everything asynchronously using what's called promises. So, and I'll leave some links to promises in the description down below if you want to know more. But promises are basically the functionality that allows to do asynchronous stuff in JavaScript. So, or at least one of the core functionalities of that. So you can either do a async await method, or you can do a chaining method where you make the call using Axios, and then once the call is made, you do a .then command and then a .catch command. And so what that does is it has one function that is followed by another function, which is followed by another function. And so the way that looks is, especially with Axios, is so you're going to call Axios, and that's going to make it's going to be a function. It's going to have some arguments, which I will show shortly. But then after those arguments, after that function, you're going to have .then, which is also going to be a function. And then after that, you're going to put .catch, which is also going to be a function. So what's going on here is, first, it's going to run the Axios call that we're running here. And then once it's done making that call, it's going to then give us the result of that call in this then function. And then if anything goes wrong with the Axios call over here, it's going to catch an error and then handle the error in this catch block. So it'd be the same as if we were to do a try catch block. So if we were to do something like this and then put a catch block and then have a error parameter right there, and then handling error and handling your error right here. So you would put in your code that you think is going to throw an error right here. And if it throws an error, then the catch block is going to, as the name implies, catch it and then handle the error so that it doesn't just completely crash your program. So this is just another way of doing something similar to a try catch block. So this is the piece of code that we're thinking might throw an error. If it throws an error, it's going to be caught by this catch block over here. If there is no error, then it's going to go to this then part of the code right here. So this is how you chain functions asynchronously. So instead of doing an async await call, you can do something like this. So the arguments that Axios needs is first, it's going to need a web address. So I'm going to copy and paste the web address that I put in earlier, which is the same address that you're seeing right below in the request call, but I formatted it a little better. Also, it's a good idea whenever you're doing a .then and .catch to break them down into different lines like this. So first thing it's going to need is an argument of the address that is being called. So also, we are doing a post request. So we're doing axios.post. And so this is actually very similar to what you're seeing here in the request call. So in request, we're doing request.post. In the same way, we're doing axios.post. So very similar syntax here. So in this particular instance, we only need a web address to be able to handle this. So what we're going to do is whenever we're going to the then block of the code, so what it's going to do is it's going to do a post request to this address right here, getting all of the permissions that we're looking for, and also getting a access token from Twitch to be able to do things in the bot. So once it makes that request and then sends something back from Twitch, if nothing goes wrong, then it's going to go to this then block. And the then block is going to give us a response. So that's the argument right here. So actually the parameter, so which is going to go into an arrow function. And in this arrow function, we're going to establish a constant that we're just going to call response data. Response data. I'm getting ahead of myself. And that is going to be equal to the response data. So, and that is similar to what we did in the request version of this, where we took the body of the request and then we parsed it into JSON. So this actually does auto parse into JSON for us with Axios. So all we have to do is just say, give me the data that is being sent back within the response. So in the request API, it's called the body, whereas in Axios, it's called data. So we're going to take in the response data, then we are going to have the access token equal to the response data dot access token. Very similar to what we were doing before. So, and then we are going to go into a for loop, very similar to actually exactly what we did before. So we're going to create a for loop, and I is going to be less than the event types, and the event types being the types of events that we want to subscribe to. So first, we're getting our access token. Then we are subscribing to all of the event sub events that we want to subscribe to. So we're going to have event types dot length, and then we are just going to loop through it. So within this loop, we are going to do another Axios call. So what we're going to do is just the same as before. We're going to do an Axios.post. And then we're going to have a .then and a .catch. So, and then I'm just going to separate it out like we did just a minute ago. And with this, what we're going to do is we are going to have the address, have the same address that we worked with before. So I'm just going to copy and paste that in. So we were going to work with the NGRock address and then calling back our create webhook callback from our own bot addresses and then just doing stuff with that. So with the then block, we don't have to actually do anything with the response. So all we're going to do is we're just going to create a empty arrow function or empty parameter arrow function. So just empty parentheses and then an arrow. And we're just going to console log here that a webhook has been webhook has successfully been established. So we're just going to say webhook successfully established. Okay. And then on the catch block, we're going to have a webhook error right here, which is going to go into an arrow function. And then if we get an error creating the webhook, we're just going to do a console.log. And that console.log is going to say webhook creation error. And then we're just going to pass in the webhook error so that we can see what went wrong. And then on the catch block down here for the initial Axios call, we're just going to put in an error parameter followed by an arrow function. And then if anything goes wrong, we are going to just console.log the error. And that's it. That is how we switch everything over from a request API call to an Axios API call. So this is going to be used whenever we are getting things from the web. So if we need to make a call to like the Twitch API or the dictionary API that we were working with before, or, you know, anything of the sort, we're just going to switch everything from the request library to the Axios library. So at the top here, it would be best to come up here and then get rid of the request constant. So const request equals require request. So get rid of that. And then you want to come over here and take your request call right here, and you just want to get rid of it. So let's see. We have, just want to make sure I'm grabbing everything we need, nothing else. So it's going to grab from here to here. There we go. And just get rid of that. And then you also want to go in your package.json up here. And you see right here where it says request in your dependencies at the bottom. Just want to take that and delete that line. So all you want is Axios, Express, Socket.io, and TMI.js. I also forgot to add in something to my description. So right there. And so that's how you replace your request calls with Axios calls. So this is only one instance of how to do that. So I'm also going to show you how I went about doing this for the other calls as well. So this is for the define command in the bot. So this is a GET request that I replaced. So what I did is I did axios.get and then the address that we were going for, and then plus the word that we're looking for. And then I went for the response, and then I said if the response status code, so if the response status, before we were looking for the body status code, something like that. So this case, it's response.status equals 200. So if we found the word, then we go through the same logic that we did before to get the stuff to go through for the define command. And then if the response is error 404, then we say we couldn't find the word. And if it's neither one of those responses, then something else went wrong and we have an error from the API itself. Like the API call went through, but we got an error that was not, an actual error, is just a HTTP error. So then we say, what status code did we get? And what is the response data that we picked up? So that's how you do that for a GET request. And then if an actual error occurred, then we just console out the error in the catch block. And then in the GET goals command, this is where we have to actually have a secondary argument in the Axios call. So you can see we don't just have a web address that we're looking for. We also have a JSON object right here, which contains our headers that we are sending to Twitch. So this is our request headers. And so our request headers are going to be our client ID, which is our API key, and our access token. So this is how you put in a set of request headers in Axios. So you can also do this for post requests, so sending a body and different things like that. So what we have here is just 2 arguments instead of 1. We have a URL followed by the request headers, and then the then block of this call then just runs through and says if we successfully got the data from Twitch with a response status of 200, then we just go through and do all the things we did before, pulling in the games or category data from our local storage. And then if something went wrong, then we print it out right here. Or if we get something that's not a status code of 200, we just say, what is the status we got and the data we got. And then also for the same thing for the end stream command. This is just for me unsubscribing to all of the event sub events that we subscribe to. So we're doing a similar to what we did up here just now. We're doing a call and then a call within the call. So similarly to that, what we're doing is we are doing a get call. So the address and then the request headers that we're doing right here. And then once we successfully get all of the subscriptions that we are subscribed to in Event Sub, then we take the response and then we do a series of delete requests, which is what Twitch requires us to do whenever we're unsubscribing from Event Sub events. So we're doing a delete call to this address right here, and then the same request headers that we did before. And then in the then block, since we don't have to mess with the response, we're just saying that we unsubscribed from that particular event. And then if we get an error in unsubscribing from the webhook, we just say we console log out that we had an error, then do that. And then if we got an error specifically from not having a successful 200 status, we just put out our response status followed by the data. And then if we get a error overall from the initial call, then we just console log the error. Overall, this feels like a much cleaner way of actually doing these types of calls than what we were doing before with the request API. And I realize that it may not seem that way, right off the bat, but the more that you make these types of calls, the more logical it'll be in the long run. And we'll be making a lot more of these calls in the future. So hopefully you can get a grasp on it as we go. So that's what I did with the Axios stuff. So replacing requests with Axios. Another thing that I cleaned up with the implementation of this is I noticed that while I was working with things that we were not actually using in the event sub process, we were not actually verifying our webhook signatures. If you'll recall, I wrote out at the top this verify Twitch webhook signature stuff up here, and then I never did anything with it. I forgot to actually implement it into the process of whenever we are setting up our event subscriptions. So what I did is for the HTTPS part of the setup, I had to, in the app.use express.json part, I had to put in some options for a single argument. It was a JSON object that just says verify and then the verify webhook signature function that we created earlier. So this just enforces that all of the data that we receive and send is actually coming from Twitch and is actually going out from us. So it just ensures that things are coming and going to and from the right places. So that's all I did there. And then as far as aesthetics go, I went into the overlay.js for the actual overlay itself, and I exchanged the alert name, the alert username, from a span. So instead of keeping the entire alert on the same line, I exchanged that for a div. So the alert username is going to be on its own line and centered. And so also in the CSS, on the Twitch alerts section, I ensured that it takes up the entire width of the overlay, which is all transparent, so it doesn't really matter all that much anyway, how much of the width it takes up. But I ensured that it took up the entire width of the overlay, and then also made sure that the text for the overlay is centered, which is going to look, I think, nicer for whenever the alerts actually come up. And then pushed the margin up by 24 pixels, and then made sure that we have no padding to keep things actually centered. So as far as all that goes, that is all the cleanup and stuff that I've done up to this point to make sure that, for those of you that are following along, we are all on the same page. So if you actually wanted to continue coding along with this, you're not wondering, like, what the heck is Silver doing? So that is that. And now it is time to actually go through and code in what all of our alerts are going to actually look like. So if you recall, the alerts that we are trying to go for are right here. So we're going for the follow alerts. We're going for first time subscribers. We are going for gifted subs, resubs, cheers, and raids. So, and you'll see like right here for the follow alert, this is the Twitch event sub event that will show a follower alert. And what we're going to do is we actually already have the visual for the follower alert set up, but since we couldn't get the Twitch CLI to show a follower alert, I just changed it to a channel point redemption. So this is actually a follow alert. So what we're doing is we're just saying if the subscription type is a follow, then we're going to first grab the username, and then we are going to create the HTML that is going to be grabbed for all this stuff. So, and what we're going to do is we are going to, in the API documentation, what we're going to do is we're going to go down to the channel follow. So what we can do is we can see what these events in the callbacks are going to look like. So whenever we get a channel follow alert, what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, if this is the type of subscription that we got, so by subscription, we mean event sub subscription. So if we're going to get a event sub subscription of channel follow, we're going to grab the event username, and then we're going to, as it shows here, just create a bit of HTML that takes the follower name and then just says has joined the Silver Fellowship, which is my specific way of showing a follow. So you can word this however you want to, structure it however you want, but this is how I'm doing it. And so we can just go through and do this for all of the different types of events that can occur. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to first copy and paste this. So I'm going to say else and then paste this. So else if the subscribe event. So we're going to go back to the event right here. We're going to go down and we're going to say, okay, channel subscribe. So this is for whenever someone subscribes to the stream for the first time. And we're just going to come down and we're going to say if the channel subscription type is channel.subscribe. So right here, and then we're gonna go back. We're gonna say if it is subscribe. So if it's subscribed, we're going to take the event username. Okay, so I can already see something that we can do to make things a bit easier for us. So what we're going to do is we are first going to create a variable. We're going to call it event username, and we're going to just have that. We're going to have this as a I'm debating how I want to do this. I'm going to have this as a ternary if statement. Now, what a ternary if statement is the same thing as if, okay, let me just put this as a string for now. So a ternary if statement would be if I wanted to say if something is true. So let's just say if something is true, then we say console.log, and then we say is true. Okay, and then we can say else is false. Console.log is false. So, like, if we're saying, like, if something in particular is true, so let's just say if event username equals true, then we're saying is true, and then if otherwise we're saying is false. The thing right here is we're only doing one thing with this conditional. So it's not like we're having, a reassignment of a variable and then doing something else, calling a function, doing something else, and then going back. We're only doing a singular thing. And then otherwise, if it's not true, then we're also just doing a singular thing. And there is something built into JavaScript, as well as a number of other coding languages, called a ternary if statement, or a ternary conditional, that allows us to do these single line if else statements on just one line with one command. And so the way that it works is we are saying we want to first have the condition that we are looking for. And what we're doing is we're saying what we're looking for is we want to know if the webhook event username, we want to know if the event username exists. And if something exists, this is, or if you're checking if something exists or not, you just put in the variable that you're looking for. So in this case, we're just having it just like this. And then you put in a question mark. And then after the question mark, you say what you want the variable to be assigned as if this is true. So in this case, if the event username, the webhook event's username exists, we want the event username to be the webhook event username. Just that simple. So webhook event dot username. Otherwise, so separated by a colon, we just want this to be an empty string. So to put this another way, let's just say if the event username is, I don't know, Jeff. So what we're saying is if the event username is Jeff, then we're going to assign this variable, the value of this variable, to this, because this is true. Otherwise, this variable is just going to be an empty string. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Please ask questions in the comments or in chat if that does not make sense, and I will try and explain it better. So we just did an if-else statement with a single line. And so what this does for us is it allows us to simplify our code up here to prevent some duplication. So we can get rid of this, and we can get rid of this. So, and just to make sure that we are making things work. So we're going to replace this follower name with the event username. And we're also going to replace this with the event username. So, and then so we can reuse this as much as we want. So now, so for the subscription, all we can do right here is we're just changing the wording here. So what we can do is we can say username is a brand new subscriber. So we'll just have it like that. So then we'll just go through and we'll do this for the remainder of the events. So let's say else if the event type, and let's look at our events that we're needing to do. So let's go for a resubscription. So let's say channel subscription message. So what this one is, so this is for a resubscribe. So channel subscription dot message. Now the the channel resubscription is a little different. As we can see in the API, what we're seeing in the documentation here is that not only do we have the username that we're working with, we also have a message and also a cumulative months. We also have a streak. So we can do a few things with this. So since we have this extra information, what we can do is we can say that if we have a message, we're going to put out the message underneath this. And then we're also going to say the person has resubscribed for this many months. Not sure yet if I want to do anything with the streak, but this should get us going for now. Also, the emotes thing is interesting. Like, I'm wondering how we can use this as well to actually get the emotes to show up on the screen. So that might be something that we do later. So since we have this bit of extra information, let's do some stuff with it. So for the resub, what we're going to do is we are first going to put in the message. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to here and we're going to, if I can actually hit the right thing, we're going to go back to our coding window and we're going to say, I'm going to remove this as a brand new subscriber. We're going to say has resubscribed at, okay, so let's also do something with the sub streak or the sub amount, I should say. So we're going to say that someone has resubscribed and then we're going to, let's see if this works. I know you can do this in React, but let's see if we can also do it in vanilla JavaScript. So we're going to do a ternary if statement in a string. So what we're going to do is we're going to say that we want the webhook event, and from the event, we want the tier. So what we want is if the event tier does not equal 1,000, which means this is a tier 1 sub. So what we're doing is, what we want is we want it that if the tier of the resub is not a tier 1 sub, we want to add in a string to say has resubscribed at, and then a plus. And then we want to take the event tier and subscribe it by 1,000. So let's see. Also, we want to put this in its own span because what we want to do is we want to have a special CSS animation go for this. So what we're going to do is we're going to say span here, and then we're going to say all caps tier space. Then what we want is we want to put another set of parentheses because we need to do a bit of math here. I know, gross, right? So what we want to do is we want to have the parse int. So we need to get the integer value from this string. So since this is a string, we need to make it into an integer. So we have the webhook event at the event tier. So now that this is a integer, we want to divide this by 1,000, which is going to give us either tier 2 or 3. At tier 2, and then let's see, this is the external part of these parentheses. So at tier 2 or 3, and then plus, and then close the span. So now that we've done that, we can say or just a empty set of ticks. So right, has resubscribed at tier 2 or 3, and then we can put in an exclamation point. Also, let's put in the exclamation point right here. And now what we want is for the message. So what we have, if we look at the documentation again, we have the WebSocket event, the webhook event, and then the message, and then the text. So we're jumping ahead in the future. If you haven't noticed by the edit of the video yet, I goofed just a moment ago and kept everything on the documentation screen for the past like 5 minutes or so. So what we've done up to this point is we have structured the resub HTML here. And so what we're looking at is we're saying that the person that has resubscribed for, and then we're creating a span that gives the number of months that they have resubscribed for. And we're going to add in some CSS IDs here in a moment whenever we're done with the remainder of the HTML structure for the rest of the events that can happen. And then we said if the tier is not 1000, so a tier of 1000 according to the API means that it's a tier 1 sub. And then if it's not a tier 1 sub, if it's a tier 2 or 3, what we want is to show also that they're resubscribing at tier 2 or 3. And so the way that we did that is we had to make this string into an integer. And so we did that by saying parse int, taking the tier, and then dividing that by 1000, which should just give us 2 or 3, and then saying this. So this is also just another ternary if statement, similar to what we did up top. And you can do these within a string, or at least you can in React. We're going to find out if you can do it in vanilla JavaScript as well. But anyway, what we're going to do here is we're going to take this and we're going to copy it over to the new subscriber event as well, since we want to know if new subscribers are subscribing at anything beyond tier 1. So we're going to say this, and we're going to enter this just to make sure we can see everything. A brand new, get rid of this, and a brand new tier 2 or 3 subscriber, or just an empty string, which shouldn't hurt anything. And that should be it for those. So what we have remaining is the gifted subs, the cheers, and the raids. So let's go back to the documentation and actually not stay there. And let's find the channel, the channel gift sub. So actually, let's just go to the top and just click it here. So gifted subs. So what we can do is we can come down here. We need to see what the subscription type is. So we're going to say if channel subscription gift. And we need to say this person has gifted this many subs, this many tier 1 subs. So this should be fairly simple. So let's go back. I need to make sure that I don't leave the screen on the documentation again. So let's copy and paste this. So this is channel subscription gift. So what we're going to say is we're going to say the username has gifted the total subs. So let's go here. Let's add in has gifted. Trying to decide how I want this to be structured. Actually, yeah, let's have all of this be, let's have this all be in the span so we can do something cool with it. So what we're going to say is we're going to say the event and then the total. Then what we want is just a space right here because we need that because we're going to have a tier thing right here. So instead of having a cumulative months thing, what we're going to do, we're going to get rid of this. We're going to get rid of this span right here. We're going to get rid of this hat. Actually, we're going to take all of this. We don't need this plus sign right here. We're good. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all of this and move it here because we want to know the tier of the sub that they are gifting regardless of what it is. So if it's tier 1, Cool. If it's tier 2, 3. Okay. Tier 1, 2, 3 subs. Then we're getting rid of this message and all of this. Getting rid of all of this. Perfect. Saying username has gifted this many subs. Let's move the span. Actually, no. Let's capitalize subs since we want this to be. All right, we're trying to hype this up. Exclamation point. All right, cool. So what we're doing here is done. So next one that we're going to do is we're going to do we've done follows, we've done subs, first time subs, resubs, gift subs. Now let's do cheers. So let's look at the documentation again. Let's go up to the top and let's find the cheer thing. Channel cheer. And then the next one is raid, so I don't have to come back to the top. So let's go down here. So the payload for this, you can gift anonymous subs. Really? I mean, sorry, anonymous cheers. You can do anonymous cheers. That's interesting. What about the subs? Do the subs get anonymous too? Because I didn't see that. Yeah, null if anonymous or not shared by the user. Okay, yes. It is anonymous. You can have anonymous stuff. Okay, so let's... Okay, so we're going to need to have another ternary operator, or another ternary if, in the gift sub thing. So we need to know if it's anonymous. Then we need to just do an epic person or something like that, or the username. So, all right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to here. We're going to go to the gift, and we're going to put this in parentheses, and we're going to put in some logic. So we're going to say let's enter this as well because it's going to get a little long. Actually, no, it's not. So if the webhook event dot is anonymous equals true, then we're going to say, otherwise, we're going to put this. All right. Let's call them an epic unknown individual. And there we go. So if we have an anonymous gifter, they will be an epic unknown individual. Otherwise, they will have all of this. Or otherwise, they will have their name, and that's that. So you cannot subscribe or resubscribe anonymously. I know you can't do that. So, alright, that actually gives us another reason to have done this ternary thing up here. So if the username is null, then it's going to be an empty string. Also, we need to not have this as an empty quote string. We need to have this as a apostrophes string. So, there we go. Great. So, now let's do some cheers since we have the anonymous logic in there as well. So, let's do this. Let's change the channel sub thing to, I think it's just cheer. I can go back in the documentation. Cheer. Yes. So, channel.cheer. Oh, wait, I changed it in the wrong place. All right. Need to change it down here. So for a cheer, we're going to leave the same stuff right there for the anonymous logic. And we're going to say has cheered instead of this. Okay, so we're going to say bits. So instead of this, we're going to have this as the, let's see, not the total. We can get rid of everything up to here. The event that we're looking for is, or sorry, the attribute that we're looking for is bits. And then there's also a message. So we're going to need to add in another div as well. All right. So we're going to add in another div with the message. So this div is this. And the div is going to have the message itself. So the webhook event dot message. That's that. And then we can just restructure things as we go, to add in various CSS or whatever we want. That should be that for the cheer. And the last one that we want is the raid. So let's just copy this and paste. Let's change this to raid. Let's check the documentation for raid stuff. So this is a raid. And so we're going to have the username, and then okay, so this is going to change. So this is going to be from broadcaster username, and then the number of viewers. Okay, this is good to know. So let me just copy this, go back to the window. So let's get rid of this logic. Let's get rid of this parenthesis, and all of this. Let's just paste in from broadcaster username, because that's who's rating in. We're also going to need, okay, has, bring this down, has rated, so is rating, this needs to be active tense, is rating with, okay, so it's going to be spaced, and we need viewers. There we go, and then we can get rid of this div because there's no extra message or anything like that. Let's check the documentation again. Viewers from broadcaster username with the number of viewers is rating with that many viewers. And that is everything that we want to do with the HTML structure of all of the various alerts that we want to handle. So I suppose the next thing that we should do is we should make some CSS that hypes up the stuff that we're doing here. So I suppose first thing we need to do is we need to add in some IDs. We're just going to do all of the hype stuff with a singular CSS class for now, or CSS ID. Well, no, let's do it with a class because this can happen more than once. So let's do a class with a name of, we're just going to call it hype section. Okay, and I'm going to copy and paste this into each appropriate area. All right. So now that we have that, let's create our hype section CSS. So in our CSS file, let's create a new idea. Let's create a new class. We're going to call that hype section. So for our hype section, we are going to need a few things. We want to have the margin first be 0. So we don't want any margin around this for now. And then we want the font size. Actually, we just want a animation. That's all we want at this point. So what I'm going to do is I am going to first create an animation. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up here. We're going to create another keyframe. Keyframes, and we're going to call it a hype section animation, or just, yeah, let's just call it hype section animation. And here we're going to start off by just alternating the colors of white and cyan, let's say. So what we're going to do is we're going to say at 0%, we want our font size to be 64. So font size is 64 pixels. And then we also want our color to be white. And really that's about it. And then we're going to say at, let's say 15, oh, let's go 10%. Let's make this thing flash. So 10%, we're going to say color cyan. And we're going to do this every 10% for, until we're done. So this should just take a moment. So then just alternating back and forth between cyan and white. And then once we hit 50%, we're going to increase the font size to like 72. So 30%. Now that we've gotten up to 50%, what we're going to do is we're just going to alternate back down. And at 100%, we're going to put the font size back where it was. All right. Now that we have all 10 of these, it should, flash rather nicely. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down here. We're going to say for our hype section, all we want is for our animation name to be hype section animation. For our animation duration, we're going to have that at 4 seconds, just like the rest. 4 seconds. And fill mode, we want that to be forwards. Animation fill mode, we want that to be forwards. So that should handle things for the animation there. Now, there is some things that we need to be doing for the animation for the events themselves. So what we have going on right now is the event just slides up, the alert just slides up and stays there. So what we want to happen is for the event to, for the alert to slide up, stay there for around 8 seconds or so, and then slide back down. And actually what we can do is we can keep it going for like 10 seconds. So what we want to do is we want to change the alert container duration to 10 seconds. So this whole thing is just going to take 10 seconds. Now, what we want is we want to change around the alert animation a bit. So for the alert animation, what we want is for the 10% to be this. So the 10% is going to be this. So it takes 1 second to slide up, and then at the 90% mark, we want the bottom to be back down to negative 72. So just pushing it all the way back down. So how we're going to do that is we're going to say, let's see, let me think this through. So this might be a little slow at first, but I think we can make it work. And we'll just probably adjust things as we go. So at 90%, we want the bottom to be 0. And then at 100%, we want the bottom to be negative 72 pixels. We're just going to move around our adjustments for the text shadow. So what we're going to do is we're going to say that at 25%, so at around a second and a half after this goes in, we want to shift the, no, that's not going to work. That's going to happen really fast. You can tell that I'm thinking through this live, so this is just part of the process. So what we want is for the first second, the shadow and the text to come up, which is what it's doing from 0 to 10%. Everything is flying up. And then once it gets all the way up, we want everything to go from 50% to 90%. Or do we? Let's actually go from 20% to 90%. So let's just move this. So let's say this is 20% and then this is 90%. So this is going to have it going for a solid, let's see, 7 seconds or so. 7 to 8 seconds. And then at the last second, everything is just going to go back down. Actually, what we want for the text shadow at that point is to be the opposite of what it is here, because we want it to follow the text. So this is going to be negative 10 pixels and then go back down. That should work. So I think, yeah, that's it. So as far as the events go, this is done. We can't really test this until we actually run it live and we actually get events live, but this should work. And I'm sure that we will tweak it as we go, but as far as just setting up the events themselves and how they look, this should work. The only thing that we need to set up now is for a queuing system for the events themselves. And for that, I think we are going to wait until the next video, because I feel like we've done enough in this video just setting everything up. And now for the logic to actually keep things going consistently and smoothly, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to set up a queuing system such that whenever an event comes in, it's going to add that event to a list of events that need to run. And then whenever something gets added to the list, that needs to just wait until the current event is done and then do the next one, then do the next one, do the next one, till we're out of events. So we are going to do that in the next video.